Yes, so my rent has doubled and I'm scared. I'm very scared. Well, after recording of this video, I will say that my anxiety and my fear around it is starting to kind of go down a little bit. But in the beginning of that transition in reality that this was happening, my anxiety was like through the roof. So how did I get here? What happened? And I also want to hit on how I realized that I was scared and why I was moving the way that I was moving. And it was kind of like an eye-opener to me that, you know, there's still some things that I have to kind of be mindful of and continue to kind of push through and realize that when you are uncomfortable, that is usually, being uncomfortable is a good thing. Because being in your comfort zone kind of keeps you complacent and it keeps you stagnant to the point where you don't want to move. And I did not even realize that. If it wasn't for my kids, I really wouldn't have realized that. And so I kind of want to just share this experience because it was very kind of eye-opening to me. And I'm like, you know I'm not the only one that could be going through this, and it could, show up in various different ways. So how did my rent double? How did I even get here? Let's talk about it. So where I am right now, my current apartment that I'm in right now, I have been living here for 7 years. That is a long time. I did not intend to stay here that long. Honestly, I thought like between like the 3 or 4 year mark, I would move. But it's been 7 years. And so I have, before moving here, I'm actually in the DMV area. I'm from a very small town called 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗡𝗖𝗧, Pennsylvania. Shout out to the 814, right by Lake Erie. I lived there, and during that time there, I experienced extreme, financial stress. I was definitely in poverty. It was very, very hard. There was a season in my life where, I was living from family to family, and, with 2 kids. That was very stressful. And so when I finally found my own housing there, was able to stabilize myself, I found that I was still struggling at a point where it didn't make sense, because I had all of this education. Here I am with a master's degree making $8 an hour. And that's a true story. And so I began to look outside of my hometown, and I just had this strong desire that, it's time, I need to leave. I need to go somewhere else. And so maybe in a different video why I picked the DMV area, because that was a very divine, unique experience on what even landed me here. But in all of that, 7 years ago, that's what kind of pushed me here and be in this apartment that I am in right now. And so when I moved here, my kids were little. Like my son was just entering into preschool, daughter in 2nd grade, and this is a 2-bedroom apartment. And so, I had a room, and then now my kids share a room. They have a bunk bed, and in the beginning it was fine. From when they first moved here to now, my little babies are big babies now, and they've been needing their own space for the longest. And I've been wanting to do that, particularly for my daughter. Like, she's the oldest, and us girls, we go through our different transitions as we're growing and developing, and I really want her to just kind of have her own space. But it has been where I'm at is so expensive, and the type of apartment that I'm living in right now has been, it was almost like a unique gem for me to find the type of apartment that I have, and to be able to have the amount of rent that I'm paying. So there was a level of comfort and security there, and anytime that I would try to look outside of that, the prices just was I just couldn't see myself affording that. It just was not realistic for me. So I continued to stay, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe next year. Now I'm literally telling my kids this, the past 4 years I've been okay, next year we're going to move, because in my mind I wanted to move from an apartment to a home. I wanted to buy a house. So me becoming financially independent, learning about my credit score, building my savings, all of that was to prepare me for a home, because I didn't want to keep moving from place to place to place. And part of that resistance of not wanting to move from place to place to place, because in my own childhood, we moved a lot. It was very rare where we stayed in a house 4, 5, 6 years. I would say it almost felt like every other year, or at least at minimum every other 2 years, we were moving into a different space. And I remember my grandma Mary, God rest her soul, her house was the only consistent home that I had in my life. Like my grandma owned her home, you know, raised her kids there, grandkids there, and even great grandkids. So that was always like a secure place for me. And I realized like that was important for me. I wanted somewhere where I can kind of place my roots, because in my childhood, like we moved literally a little too much. And so I know that played a factor into it as well. And so here I am at the point come this year where I had looked for a 3-bedroom apartment in the apartment complex that I'm in right now. Like me and my daughter, we went over, we got the tour of the place, I started the paperwork, and then they shut my application down and said that I didn't qualify for the apartment because I was over income. Like the apartment place that I'm living right now, it is income based, and so when I came in, my income was really low, so I wasn't over the threshold. So it's like a starting income where you can qualify, and then there's like a max. And so I'm pretty much at the max now, but basically me moving into a new apartment, it restarts my like application process, and I'm too high for the entry point, if I'm making sense. And so that was like a punch at the gut, because I had already started the paperwork. Me and my daughter had went to go look at the apartment. She even got to see, I'm like, oh, this will be perfect, this will be your room. And like to have to turn around and then tell them like, no, actually we won't be moving, was like really, really hurtful. And I want to say that was like, it wasn't this year, it was like August of 2023, because my lease, I usually have to let them know by September whether or not I'm going to renew my lease or not. So that was around 2023 that had happened. So then we go into 2024, and then a lot of stuff happened that, I'm sorry, I can't talk on camera because it's like personal to like my relationship, love life, where our family just like crumble. And that was around a time where I end up getting a new job, the job that I have now, and I was able to boost my income. And then in my mind, I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna grind it out one more year. I practically lost half of the income that my ex-partner was bringing in, so it became back to just me. But I'm like, next year we're gonna move into a house. And when I say the way my daughter and my kids looked at me like, Mom, like you say this every year, you say every year we're gonna move, and like they're like, can you just, like, they wasn't having it. So I'm like, that really was like a punch in the gut. I'm like, you know what, let me just go and look. And so that's what I did. Like I remember riding around when I was picking them up for school, I was being more mindful and paying attention to for rent signs. And there was a for rent sign that I seen, and I called the number, set up a tour to go and look at it was actually a house, to go look at it. And when I went to go tour it and she told me the rate, I'm like, I cannot. It was like triple my rent. So then even though I am a private person, I do just find like comfortability in sharing my story. So as I was talking to the representative or the agent there, I was just telling her my situation. Like, I'm in this apartment, I've been here for 7 years, we've outgrown the space. Like, I just want to give my kids their own room. This is like kind of where I am like financially. And she was just like, well, I can take you on as a client and help you find a place. And I'm like, oh, for real? And she's like, you know, yeah, very sweet lady, and her name is Nicole. And I'm like, oh, we got the same name. My middle name is Nicole. So she's really, really cute, really nice. And so she was willing to help me, and she kind of explained to me like what the process was look like with the fees and stuff. And so basically she would get a fee on the back end from whoever the landlord was, or whatever housing that she would find me, as long as they accepted. And then she would let me know up front if they didn't accept the fee, and then I would have to cover the fee. But she wanted to stay away from that, so she wouldn't look for places where basically on the back end she would kind of get her cut. So I'm like, okay, great. And I hope I'm explaining that right. I may be explaining it wrong. For those of you who are agents out there, realtor agents or whatever, you know, let me know. And then she's also like, well, I'll get into that a little bit later. So yeah, so then I gave her my price range, and she set me up on some little realtor thing that she used, and I began to get like notifications of places that were within my budget. So what is my budget? For context, my current rent now is $15.93. And I gave her a range between 23 to 28 at the max. And when I crunched my numbers, I knew it was something that I could afford, but I knew it was going to put me back into that space where money was going to be tight. And so, but I'm like looking, I could just see my kids' face in my head, just like the sadness in their eyes. Like, you keep saying next year, for the past 4-5 years. Like, no ma'am, get to work. So those were the numbers that I gave her. And depending on where you at, you may be looking at me with like 3 heads, like, girl, like what? But the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area is very expensive, and I'm particularly in the Northern Virginia area. So think like Falls Church, Alexandria, Arlington, what else is over here? Think that area, okay? So if you from over here, if you know, you know. So it's expensive out here, and I'm here particularly for the public schools because it is just great public schools. But anyways, I digress. So those were the numbers that I gave her. And there were a couple of spots that I had toured. And then I was also apprehensive with applying to multiple apartments because, you know, they run your credit. And every time, you know, they run your credit, that is a hard inquiry on your credit report, meaning that will be on your credit for the next 2 years. Anytime there's a hard inquiry, that does impact your credit and drop your points down. So that's why you don't want to have like multiple hard inquiries, whether you're applying for a home or a car, or looking for an apartment. Like, you're putting all these applications in, and every time they're pulling your credit, there is taking a ding at your credit. And I worked very, very hard to update my credit, to understand how credit score work, and I let her know that, because the end goal is still to buy a house. And so I knew if I was going to apply for a new place, that I wanted the likelihood of me getting it to be like very, very high. So there was one place that I went to go see, and it was like very close to their school, really nice, a little outdated, but it was more space. Like, I was not about to be picky. I'm like, just as long as they got 3 rooms, we good. Like, and the lights work, the doors closed and locked. Like, I'm not about to get, you know, all up in arms about the paint in the bathroom and the appliances. Like, we're not about to do that. So this apartment was nice. It was okay. It was spacious. And then there was the second place I went to go see. And you know how you walk into some and then you just like, yeah, this is for me. Like, I really want this place. And that's how I felt when I walked into this house. But it looked like it was not going to happen. And she let me know. She was just like, she said, this house that you see, she was like, even for the price range, she was just like, for the open house, she's like, I want you to get there early. She was like, she's like, I can tell like this is probably going to be high competition. And she was like, I can even see people offering to pay more, a little bit more, to, you know, basically secure the home. One, this place has a backyard. I haven't had a backyard in so long. It had a full backyard, basement, 2.5 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, living room, dining room, and all that. And it's 3 levels. So it's like the upstairs, and then like when you first walk in, the main floor, and then downstairs is the basement, which is, there's also a room down there, and then there's also a washer and dryer, which is big for me because like I live in an apartment building. Anybody who lives in an apartment complex, if you know, you know. Well, my particular apartment complex is like, there are certain units that have washer and dryers in them, and there's certain units that don't. And like when I came in, your girl was, you know, little, you know, poverty Tashana coming in. So the unit that I have did not have all of the amenities. I do have a dishwasher though, but there's a shared laundry room that, you know, I can use and I had access to. But I would go to a different laundromat kind of out in the community that was, the washer and dryers just work better. So I have been using public washer and dryers for the past 7 years. So when I saw, like, I was like, I would have my own washer and dryer, you know, it's the little things. I was like, this is so nice. And so when I had left the open house, I remember it was me and another lady that had came and viewed it and asked like a couple of questions, and I had called her, and I called my agent, and she was just like, I told her, I was like, I am interested, I do want to put an application into this house. And she was like, well, let's wait until after the open house is over. It was from like 10 to noon. She was like, I'll call the landlord and see, you know, basically kind of get a gauge of what the competition is like, and how many applications that, you know, he received. So I'm like, okay. So I went to the open house, noon came, I'm waiting for my agent to kind of call me back, and she called me back. When she called me back, she was like, Tashana, she was like, actually, there are no applications in right now. She was like, so if you want to apply, you can. And the lease right now is for a year. But she said usually what she likes to do to kind of make the tenant look a little bit more marketable, she was like, instead of doing 12 months, let's offer 18 months. So they're more likely to, you know, accept your application. I'm like, okay, cool. So I put in the application, submitted it. And then the landlord approved my application. It was just like, yeah, she can move in October. I'm like, slow down. Like it went so fast. And the reason why October didn't work is because my lease is up in December and I need my security deposit back. And so I was like, I can't do October, but I can move like November 15th is like the earliest that I can move into. And I'm like, just to be realistic, because honestly, at the end of November, I would basically have to be out of here because my lease is up in December. And the crazy thing of like how fast this had happened, like I went to go tour that other house. I met Nicole, who is now my agent, and like this happened within days. And so by the 30th of September, I had to let my current apartment know whether or not I was going to renew my lease, because I think you have to give them like a 60-day notice before your lease is up. And I think they may ding you or like cut from your security deposit if you don't. And so I remember it happened before, like literally like 2 days before that like notice period. So I was just like, you know, are they willing to allow me to like to move in? Like, I was like, I can do November 15th at the earliest. And so she went back to the landlord and proposed that. And he was just like, well, is she willing to do 2 years? And I'm like, because when I spoke to my agent, remember my initial goal, like I want to buy a house, like I want home ownership. This is something I've been like dreaming of ever since I became a parent, honestly. And so with her, she proposed to me like, why don't you find out, you know, because realistically in the time frame of me trying to get out and buy a home before my lease was up was not realistic. She was like, why don't we just find, you know, a bigger space for you or your kids now? You can stay there for the year and we can kind of prep within that year to get you ready to buy a home. And she let me know like all the little tricks and stuff. Nicole is bad. She's bad. If you're DMV area, I'm gonna drop her information because she's good. And so that was our original plan, for me to live there for a year and then prepare for home ownership within that year. And so she was just like, well, you know, and being that we extended 18 months, like another 6 months, it's just like, okay, really, what's like, you know, what's the big deal? So I was like, okay, I'm willing to do 2 years. So approved my application, security and first month's rent was due. And this apartment, so I'm going from $1,593 to $2,800 a month, and that is like, it's like a shock. And it was it was a hit, and it was something that I've been running from for a long time because I was scared about, like, all my mind kept thinking about is how I lived before I moved to the DMV. And I'm going to try to not get emotional, but how I lived before I came to the DMV, I don't want to be back in that space. Yeah, I'm gonna pause. Okay, I'm back and a little red-eyed. Yeah, I'm gonna try to get through this. I gotta wrap this up quickly because I'm not trying to be like the emotional person on camera. But that has been my fear, because that was a reality of my life for such a long time. I became a parent very young. I wasn't a teenager, but I was still young. I was just entering into my 20s. And ever since entering into parenthood, it's been extremely hard for me financially. And so I know that's what kept me still, is that fear of just like, I've finally been able to kind of like establish some sense of security. I'm able to pay my rent on time. Everything is on, you know, and I even have a little left over to save. Like, I actually have an emergency savings. And, you know, with this transition, I had to dig into my emergency savings, and, you know, I got to rebuild it. But that fear kept me stagnant and kept me like in a place. And so one of the things that, you know, my profession, I'm a therapist by trade. So I know these things, and sometimes you know what you know is what you know, but applying what you know is two different things. And so oftentimes I know that our actions or our perceptions of our world is sometimes these unconscious thoughts that, you know, our brain has kind of like programmed for us to survive, right? Or for us to cope with those uncomfortable and unprecedented type of situations that we experience at our life. And our mind and our body is designed to want to protect us. And sometimes the way that we operate, we're trying to protect us, and it may have served us in a certain season of our life, but it's actually handicapping us now with the new season. Like the way that I was moving in the beginning, it made sense, but now I've, you know, increased my income substantially within the 7 years that I've been here. And it's like, when I looked at the numbers, I'm like, girl, you can afford it. Like, it's going to be a little bit tight, but you can afford it. And you have ample ways to get creative and increase your income, particularly with whether it be in my career or here on YouTube. Like, there's ways for you to make up for this bump in your expenses. And so that has been like the turning point for me. And once I realized, like, once it became a reality, like set, like, oh crap, I'm moving and my expenses are about to change, like, I just felt myself like excited and sad and scared at the same time. And I realized, like, all the years that I kept, procrastinating or saying next year or next year, it was because I was scared. I was scared that I would put myself in a position where I wouldn't be able to meet my basic needs and survive. And anyone who's ever experienced that, like, your whole foundation is rocked. Like, you're constantly in crisis. Like, it's hard for you to focus on anything else because you're basically trying to make sure, where am I going to lay my head and where am I going to stay warm at night? And like I said, it was a season in my life where I was with my babies, like, from house to house. Thank God I had family that supported me, but that's just not where, I don't see myself going back to that, but that was a reality of my experience and a fear that I could return to that. And so what I decided to do, or what I have done to process my emotions, is journaling. And I created this journal called the Mental Wealth Finance Journal months ago, because I know this is something that has impacted my journey throughout the way. And a lot of times where people talk about money and saving and making more money, there's not enough focus on the mental health aspect of it and why we operate or view our finances the way that we do. And sometimes it is that personal mental experience that is tied to our emotions and how we operate. And so I do want to share one of my journal entries from my Mental Wealth Finance Journal that kind of helped me process the emotional response that I have. And I'll read what I essentially kind of put in my diary, so don't judge me, y'all. All right, so this is my Mental Wealth Finance Journal. This is actually the first rendition of it. It doesn't look like this. You can buy it off of Amazon. It don't look like this though. It's a lot more simpler, but this was like in the beginning edited stages. And I am like very green. I don't like to waste paper. And so I'm like, this is my hard copy of the original. This is what I've journaled out of. And so in this journal, it is a prompt journal. And one of the questions that came to mind when I was going through this was, when you are stressed about money, how do you respond emotionally? And my response was, when I'm stressed about money, I become fearful and still. Emotionally, I don't want to move away from what is familiar and comfortable, but at the same time, the concern of my finances still sits in the back of my conscience, waiting to be answered, waiting to be addressed. When this happened, I feel myself becoming anxious, fearing my financial situation will worsen, and I'll return to a point in time in my life where I am unable to meet my basic needs. So staying still seems like the best option for the moment to survive. And that is exactly when I sat down and really thought about it. I'm like, I'm scared to move, because what I have right now is safe, it's secure, it's stable, and I'm going into a place that's uncomfortable, that's unfamiliar. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, right? And I don't want to go back to what I know it's like when you don't make it. I gotta wrap this up. But I'm sharing that in hopes to just be transparent. Like, financial independence is such a glamorous word, but it's something I desire so much. And in my career, like, I'm aiming to get my license in regards to social work. For any of my social workers out there, I'm studying for my licensure test. I've actually may document that and kind of take y'all on that journey to get my licensure, so I can, put myself better in my career. And then I'm going to try to grow my YouTube channel. I'm not viewing my YouTube channel as the end all be all, because I'm realizing, like, I like working. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting a full-time job with benefits, but I also understand the benefit of having additional sources of income. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I hope this video was helpful and valuable. I'm going to wrap it up, because what we're not going to do is be crying on camera all the time. So until next time, dream, believe, and achieve.